All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Well, guys, the Braves took care of business today, barely, but they took care of business today, beating the Marlins 5-4. And what this does is it sets up, well, at least the Braves are staying alive, right? We don't know at this point. I'm coming to you after this Braves win, but before the Mets take on the Phillies Sunday night, right? So we don't know exactly where this race is going to stand Tuesday night when the Braves take on the Mets. But again, the Braves had to have this game in Miami. They were able to take it. That Miami series got off to a really frustrating start when you feel like you need to take every game every game for the rest of the way, honestly, in this fight for the playoffs. They drop a game 4-3 to the lowly Marlins against a pitcher no one's ever heard of. I'm sure he's a great guy, but right, no one's ever heard of this guy, and that's definitely been one of the themes of the year for the Braves. Kind of underwhelming performance against underwhelming opposing pitchers and underwhelming teams. The Braves barely have a winning record against teams under 500 this year, so they at least they were able to squeak out this win 5-4 today. At worst, they're going to enter this must-win series against the Mets down 2, but hopefully Zach Wheeler, he's on the mound for the Phillies. It's so bad to have to pull for the Phillies ever, but Zach Wheeler's on the mound for the Phillies. Hopefully he can take care of business against Tyler McGill and the Mets, and the Braves can go into this series against the Mets just down 1 game. I think that is the best scenario for the Braves. Obviously, at this point, it is the best scenario, but with only down 1 game, you take 2 out of 3. You win the season series, so you have the tiebreaker. And at that point, you take care of business against Kansas City, and you're in the playoffs. And so that is the pathway forward. Again, if you're down 2, then honestly, you kind of have to sweep them, and that's going to be tougher. It's not impossible. Actually, the Braves have done that before. They did it in 2022, but this is certainly a little bit of a different team that we're talking about with the 2024 Braves. So yeah, at least they bounced back today, and they're putting themselves in a position to stay alive for this last wild card spot. So the big news of the week is Ozzie Albies. Ozzie finally returns. The Braves get one of their regulars, one of the pieces that you would call the heart and soul of the Braves. Can you imagine? I mean, guys, Ozzie, Austin Riley, and Ronald Acuna out of this lineup. It hasn't felt like the Braves, quite honestly. So it's great to get Ozzie back. It's Ozzie in a different form, right? Because he's hitting right-handed only as he returns. A lot of people have wanted him to hit only right-handed for a long time because he's always been so good from the right side and kind of average or maybe even a little below average from the left side. Of course, the problem with that is it's not just as simple as hit from the right side and you're going to be just as good against lefties as you are against righties. The ball's coming in at different angles. Oftentimes the ball is fading away from you more instead of coming into you more. And so you're seeing some of those adjustment issues for Ozzie. He's honestly not looked very good. He did hit a home run today, but that's kind of the only swing I've seen from him that looked good against a righty. So 1 hit in 3 games coming back. So yeah, sure, it's great to have just that general uplift of having Ozzie in the lineup and at second base, but you also really want him to come through at the plate. He is hitting second against righties, which is kind of weird to me. I would like for him to hit maybe 5th in the order against righties and let Soler hit second, and then you could hit Ozzie second in the order against lefties. That would make a lot more sense to me. Because Soler, generally speaking, is going to be the better on-base guy. Even though he hasn't been super great as of late for the Braves, I still would prefer that. Okay, I'm nitpicking maybe a little bit there, but I think that would be the better thing to do. So Ozzie returns, and this is great. Hopefully he can start really hitting well here soon. I think he'll also be facing a couple lefties in the days to come as well, which should help. But yeah, the Mets have stayed hot. This has been one of the frustrations, and of course, this is why we're fighting for this last wild card spot. If it were 2023, the Braves would be in the playoffs. I mean, the last spot in the wild card is probably going to be a 90-win team, and so it's just harder to get into the playoffs this year than it has been actually in the last few years. But yeah, the Mets are hot. They have been 14-5 in September. And going into Sunday night's game, I mean, they lost Francisco Lindor a little while ago. They haven't missed a beat. To their credit, they promoted Ronald Acuña's brother, Luis Angel Acuña, and he just looks like a little Ronald Acuña. And he's come up and, 10 of 26 in his first few games, 3 home runs, and he's definitely bringing a spark to the Mets at the worst time possible for the Braves. So the Braves, right? Let's focus on them a little bit more, guys. And look, if you had to tell someone who's never watched the Braves, what are the Braves about? To me, it would be pitching, right? Starting pitching and power hitting, right? Pitching and power. That's the Braves, and it's been the Braves really the entire Alex Anthopoulos era. I think he has very specifically crafted this team around those two things. And look, there's a lot of positive to that. Obviously, great pitching is great pitching, and the Braves have always been about that. But the leaning into and the relying on the power part of it has given great benefits, right? We've seen great benefits in 2023 especially. But in 2024, it's gone the other way, right? It's been a lot of inconsistency. It's been more bad than good. And you always have to say that, of course, a lot of that is due to injury. Some of the Braves' best players have been out, but it's also been a lot of underwhelming performance, even by those guys who have been injured, right? Even by Ronald, even by Austin Riley, just underperforming this year. And just a lot of inconsistencies from this powerful lineup. The Braves, the inconsistency, look no further than recently, right? They score 15 runs against the Reds. Just a fun game to watch. You got 6 home runs in that game, 4 3-run homers, which was a major league record, never been done before. And then they go into the very next game, this game I just talked about. Again, you just feel like every game's a must-win, and you lose to the Marlins 4-3. The offense, after the early innings, goes totally silent. They lose to this guy, Valente Biezo, which I've never heard of before, and I think he's only made about 12 starts in his major league career. Doesn't have terrible numbers. I don't want to down the guy too much, but it's just one of those games you feel like you got to win, and you got a pretty good start from Charlie Morton, and then it just didn't happen. So, yeah, a lot of missed opportunities again. Maybe that is the theme of the year, is missed opportunities. And so, yeah, it just leaves you a little frustrated, to say the least. Maybe more than a little frustrated, right? And so this takes me back, and I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys about this. A couple weeks ago, Chipper Jones made some comments on Corey Kluber's podcast. And, he basically admitted his frustration with the Braves' hitting philosophy of this really just leaning into and relying on power to be the primary method of offense. Now, he was very honest. I mean, he was honest in that, yeah, it's the main way to score runs. The Braves obviously were incredibly successful doing this in 2023. But it also shouldn't be shocking that Chipper likes a more balanced approach. That literally is the type of hitter he was throughout his Hall of Fame career. And he also will admit all the time that he's more old school. He grew up around that. He played for Bobby Cox, right? I mean, we all know, and probably a lot of older Braves fans like me. I'm not that old, but I'm old enough. Probably older than a lot of you guys. It's you grow up around, supposedly doing the things the right way and getting runners over, getting runners in, and the value of the RBI and all that. I mean, Hank Aaron would always talk about, it was the thing he valued the most about hitting, is getting runners in. And a lot of that has been devalued in this era of baseball, and Chipper is in the old school vein of things. I mean, he just is. And so these comments weren't shocking to me that he would fit into this, this philosophy. What was a little surprising to me is that he was willing to say it out loud on a podcast. I wonder if that is his slight way of getting his message across to the Braves front office. But it's just true, right? Alex, by the way, he wasn't throwing Alex under the bus. There were multiple times in that podcast he praised Alex for a lot of the things he's done Obviously 2021 and that World Series being the number one thing, but clearly, I think Chipper is saying that we've gone maybe a little too far. We've leaned a little too much into the powers thing, into valuing slug and not valuing everything else, right? Getting on base, a little higher average, the ability to handle the bat and get runners over, get runners in. And it's certainly, you cannot really argue. I mean, it's showing up in a big way this season. And again, yes, a lot of that is due to injury, but injuries are a part of the game, right? So in 2023, almost everything went right? There weren't many injuries. You had a little bit of an injury to Michael Harris, but otherwise everybody was healthy. Almost everybody had career years. Everybody's feeling good about themselves and everything's clicking. Acuna 40-70, Matt Olson 54 home runs. Ozuna had his best season of his career. Maybe this year's been even a little better for him, but yeah, everything was clicking, right? And this year, things go wrong, right? It's a regression to the mean, maybe, and maybe it's a little below what you would expect them to do moving forward. But when that kind of thing happens, right, and you aren't able to hit a home run with consistency or even find the barrel of the bat to the ball very consistently, this is when you need to be able to move runners over and consistently get runners on. I mean, guys, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if you've watched the Braves consistently this year, how many times have they had a runner on third, nobody out or one out, and have not got him in? Right. And then they end up losing that game by a run. I mean, it's just constant. And it happened today. In today's game, a game you have to have, it happened, and they barely squeaked out the win. They were fortunate to do it, and they won it, right? You give them credit for that. But this team just, they don't have the ability to come through in the clutch very often. Matt Olson did today, had a big hit, but it was, again, this was an inning where runner on third, nobody out. First two guys come up, they ground out. You can't get them in, and then Olson thankfully came through in that, and obviously that run was massive. You win by a run, but I think Chipper's point was well taken. I think it was well timed. It's just true, and I really wish that this team would. You don't have to blow up the entire lineup, but bring in one or two guys who have the ability, right, to handle the bat a little bit more, who are a little less strikeout prone, and are willing to, sacrifice an out or be able to, when they need to, come through with a sac fly and that sort of thing. I think it would be really, really valuable for this team. I've been actually, if you've been listening to me, guys, I've been beating this drum for a while, even early 2023. And then again, like Chipper, I kind of had to shut up because it was a record-breaking season when everything goes right for you and hit 307 home runs. But again, this season has not been that. And here we are, right, fighting for our playoff lives. And I mean, if the season ended today, we'd miss the playoffs. So it's just Chipper admitted, right? He said he'll be at home watching games and he wants to throw a shoe at the TV, and he ends up turning games off, and it's the first time he's done that in a long time. And I think we can all, as Braves fans, appreciate that attitude, right? Appreciate that emotion, because this team has been really hard to watch, really frustrating to watch. Their two-strike approach really it just stinks, right? A lot of strikeouts, a lot of pulling off the ball. I mean, if I have to see Orlando Arcia come up one more time in a big moment, it's just, I want to pull my hair out. It's really hard to watch, and it's not just him. I know I kind of point him out more than probably anybody else, but he frustrates the heck out of me. So yeah, anyways, guys, it seems like an organizational philosophy that Alex Anthopoulos has really embraced, right? This slugging percentage is a number one priority. And you can appreciate that, but I think there comes a point when things get too imbalanced in your lineup. And then, of course, when certain things go wrong or a couple guys go out of the lineup, it really craters. And that's just that's what's happened this year. I think the thing that turned this it kind of shifted the Braves and their offense as a whole was the Freddie Freeman decision. And I'm not going to rehash that, but it's as simple as Freddie, one of the most consistent, balanced hitters in all of baseball in recent history, right? He's kind of a Chipper Jones look-alike from the left side of the plate in terms of what those two brought, right? 300 hitter, 400 on base, 500 slugging percentage for a career, basically, right? And again, I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, and I'm not even blaming Matt Olson. He is who he is. He's a pure power hitter, right? But they bring in Olson for Freddie, and now you don't have the consistency at the heart of your order. And in 2023, it seemed better than Freddie, right? Even though, you can make that argument who was better in 2023. They both had great seasons, but 54 home runs sure does feel good. It sure does look good. But this year it just hasn't worked out well for Olson. But even if it did, right? Even if Freddie and Olson have, in terms of, let's say, WAR, right? They have the same value to each other. They're still different players with different impacts on the team. And again, this is not me bashing on Olson. I just think that move is really telling. It's probably the most telling move that Anthopoulos has made in his entire Braves GM career is the choice that he made to go for power over balance. And he continues to make that choice. And I'm still a fan of Alex Anthopoulos. I will say this season has made me look a little more closely, right? Still a fan, but looking a little more closely at the decisions he's making and how much he is leaning into the power thing. I mean, you think about Jared Kelenic this offseason, that ends up not really working out great. He's basically been benched for the last month. Big power potential, but big strikeout numbers. Who did he go out and get at the trade deadline? Jorge Soler. Big power, and we love Soler. We love what he's done as a Brave in the World Series, but big power, big strikeout numbers. So this team, as constructed, and certainly with the injuries in mind, this team is really living and dying with power, right? With the home run. And if they come through in the biggest moments, then maybe they still make it into the playoffs. But there's been massive moments of not being able to touch the baseball, right? A lot of strikeouts, a lot of not coming through in the clutch moments. And it's deflating. And honestly, I think it's actually a little less fun to watch. It's really fun when you hit 300 plus home runs, but in normal seasons, I think it's actually a lesser style of baseball. So look, the other thing that is a massive obvious impact, right? We can talk about injuries, but particularly Ronald Acuna not being there. I think of this as like, for almost all of my life, the Braves have had anchors in their lineup. Like you've had Chipper Jones, you've had Freddie Freeman, and then last year in Ronald Acuna. I mean, just these great anchors that no matter what the rest of the team's doing, they're impacting the game offensively. They're sparking things offensively. They're coming through. I mean, Ronald hit over 330 last year. People lose that, in well over 400 on base percentage. So people just talk about the 40-70, but actually that stuff and the low strikeout rate, those to me are the greater impacts on the team and how they approach hitting, right? And so you haven't had that. And so on top of everything else, I think that's been a really big thing. But ultimately, go back and listen to that podcast with Chipper on it. He doesn't harp on it too much, but he does bring it up. And I think Chipper is totally right. Obviously, right? I'm in the Chipper camp on this. You have to be able to score in multiple ways. And the last thing I'll say about this is it really shows up in the playoffs, right? You have to be able to make contact. You're going against the best teams, probably top 3 starting pitchers, and that's kind of it. There's not a lot of bad pitchers pitching in the playoffs. And it showed up the last 2 postseasons, right? Had great offenses get shut down for the most part. And, you can blame the 5 days off and all that stuff, which I think is valid. But I think if you have different approaches and at least a few guys in the lineup who are higher average, higher on base guys, it just benefits your team across the board. Okay. So let's pivot back, right? Let's talk about the Braves in the playoff race here. Um, if and I don't want to be too negative here, but I do want to voice one more frustration with this team. If the Braves do miss the playoffs this year, I really think their mediocre performance against sub 500 teams is going to be one of the biggest reasons. The Braves are only 35-31 against teams under 500. I mean, they have losing records to the White Sox, the Reds, and the Nationals. They're 5-8 against the Nationals this year, and that's just to name a couple, a few teams. Um, I mean, just some bad losses. And making bad pitchers on bad teams suddenly look good. I mean, that's one of the most frustrating things about this team. It seems like a trend all year. The Braves face a pitcher you've never heard of with a 7 ERA, and you're like, oh, this game, we got this one. And then you look up and you're in the sixth inning and you've scored one run. And it's like, how did he suddenly find it against the Braves? And a lot of it's due to some of the stuff I just talked about that Chipper was talking about. Um, but it happened again today against the Marlins in a must-win game. And again, thankfully, the Braves were able to really get to the Marlins bullpen. But a guy named Darren McGawkin, who I've never heard of, I mean, he's only made a few appearances in his major league career. Again, over 7 ERA. He goes 4 innings, 1 earned run, 4 hits allowed. He got out of a bases loaded, 1-out jam. Again, another instance where the Braves don't come through in this kind of situation. Laureano grounds to the third baseman, double play. And then the Braves did really nothing else against him. You had several really bad, first pitch outs, swinging at first pitches. Ozzie's done that a lot, by the way, since coming back, and I know he almost always does that. But I think it's really been a negative for him to get back into like a good place with his swing. So, moving forward, the Braves hitters have to have a better plan at the plate, a better game plan, more patience at the plate, swinging at hittable pitches only. And they just, man, it's a lot of this year has been, I can't tell you how many times, right? You take 2 pitches right down the middle and then swing at the pitch off the plate. And it's just like they have no game plan up there. So they have to do a better job of that. And I know maybe it's the bad way to look at it, but when you're this close, you're just out of the playoffs. You look at the games that got away from you, and you're like, man, if we don't make the playoffs, it's those games that you can blame, like the 1-0 loss against the White Sox. Remember that crushing comeback that the Rockies had against the Braves in Colorado? Laureano, when he whiffed on that fly ball against the Mets, it was a walk-off. There's just been so many games where the Braves haven't quite come through, had a lot of opportunities, and then, they lose close games. And so, this is what they've earned, right? They've been good enough to have a chance to get into the playoffs, but they've also been bad enough to where they're on the outside looking in. So here we are, right? It's like in both ways. It can go both ways. It's on the one hand, the Braves could easily be at the top of the wild card standings if they just did the little things better this year, right? I'm not going to say they'd be on top of the Phillies, but they'd at least be on top of the wild card if they could have just done the little things a little better. And then on the other hand, it is impressive that with all the injuries, here they are with a chance to get in the playoffs, right? So you do have to give them some credit there. I know I'm being really, there's a lot of negativity coming from me, but there is, from a group, right? I always talk, this group is a group of really good guys. They're fighting hard. They have not fallen apart. I think a lot of teams would have fallen apart totally mentally. So they haven't done that. But they also just haven't done the little things very well at the same time. And they're going to have to do the little things well to make the playoffs. And these next 3 games against the Mets, they have to be played pretty much flawlessly. So, like I said, I already talked about the Mets a little bit. Hopefully the Braves can go into this series just down 1 game, and then it's a little more manageable. Obviously, you're always wanting to sweep, but even in that scenario, 2 out of 3 gets you in a pretty good position. But you got to win this series no matter what, right? So the hard truth is the Braves have to get out of this Mets series with either a tie or leading the East by a game. So hopefully that can happen. But it's a tough task that they put themselves in. All right, so previewing this series a little bit more. The Mets are playing great. I already mentioned 14-5 in September. They've got a ton of confidence, a lot of belief. It's a mixture of good pitching and timely hitting. And the Braves are really going to have to show up in a big way and play at a high level for these 3 games. The pitching matchups, I actually do think the pitching matchups favor the Braves a little bit. The pitching matchups have not been posted, so I'm guessing. So this could change. But I expect game 1 to be Chris Sale versus Jose Quintana. This would allow Sale to pitch on regular rest because the Braves have a day off Monday, tomorrow. And it would also allow him to pitch in the final game of the season on regular rest if the Braves need him to do that. And obviously you would want him to do that. Game 2, then you would bump Schwellenbach to game 2 versus Severino, who's maybe been the Mets' best pitcher. He's a good power pitcher. And then game 3, Charlie Morton versus David Peterson. The best thing I like about these matchups is the Braves would face 2 lefties. And I think they're just a better offense against lefties. Ozzie gets to be a little more comfortable against the lefty. Laureano crushes lefties. So I think just generally that would be a positive. So I think in this scenario, game 1 and game 3, the Braves would be favored. I think game 2 would be a little bit more of a toss-up, though I've really liked how Schwellenbach has been pitching. So okay, yeah. In general, I really like the matchups in this. I think the Braves should take 2 out of 3. They're at home. But should they? Yes. Will they? Well, you know how this season has gone. So we're just going to have to see, guys. But look, I appreciate your fandom for the Braves. I'm certainly going to be watching and rooting for them. I really appreciate you guys listening to this episode, and I'll talk to you soon. We'll see how it goes.